Now that you know how to read a file and how to write or append in a file, you are able to edit a small file. So to edit a file, you need to first read the file, which means that you need to, your first action is to open the file and read it and put the content of the file in a variable in RAM. Here I'm going to call this variable old content. Afterwards, you change whatever you want to be changed. In this case, for example, you want to change the first fraction, 3 space 4 to 5 blank space 7, uh, and then you put this new content in a new variable called a new content, for example, and afterwards you open the same file and using the write mode so that the previous content is completely removed, and then you write down the new content inside the file, and the file is stored on hard disk. Let me provide greater details for this case. So we wanted to change 3 blank space 4 to 5 blank space 7. First, we need to read the old content from the file using fh.read. You can easily read everything and put it in the old content as the variable. After that, you use the function replace, which is built, which is a method for strings, and simply provide 3 blank space 4 backslash n as the first argument and 5 blank space 7 backslash n as the second argument. As a result, inside the old content, all 3 backslash 3 blank space 4 backslash n are replaced with 5 blank space 7 backslash n, and the result is already in the new content. Now your job is to just to just write this new content in the file using fh.write. So this is quite, the simplest way to edit a file. But you see that in this case, uh, there can be an issue, and the issue is that, because you are trying to replace a pattern of 3 blank space 4 backslash n, you mistakenly change the last fraction in the file, which is 13 blank space 4 to 15 blank space 5 blank space 7 as well. So this is a semantic error. There is an unwanted change in this case. So it's better to read the file line by line and then do the replacement in this case. So whenever you see that, you can easily use read and replace to resolve the issue, then you can go for it. But if you think, if you find semantic errors, if there is no other way, then you need to use readlines. So first we get the old and new values from the user, and we place them in 2 variables called old and new respectively. Afterward, in line 3 to 5, we read the content of the file and we put it in the RAM in the variable called old content, and then we try to read this old content line by line. That means separated using backslash n. So the first time in line 7, when we execute line 7, L would be equal to 3 blank space 4 backslash n. Or if we read the last line, it would be like 13 blank space 4 backslash n. So in line 9, what we do is we remove the backslash n using R strip. R removes backslash n's and other white spaces that are at the right side of the string. So the result would be 3 blank space 4 or 13 blank space 4. Then we check if this value is equal to the old value that we would like to change. If that's true, which is correct for the first line, 3 blank space 4 is exactly what the user is given to us as the old value. So in the new content, which is a variable that includes empty string, we add the new value plus a backslash n so that it goes to the next line. If in the case of 13 blank space 4, it is not equal to 3 blank space 4. Therefore, the else statement lines 11 and 12 are executed, and we simply add that line to the content. Note that L is 13 blank space 4 backslash n, so that is going to be easily added to the new content. Afterwards, in line 13 and 13 to 15, we just open the file in the W mode and write everything in the file. Pause here for 4 to 5 minutes and try to uh, do this exercise where you need to edit the information of information related to a customer. In particular, you want to change the name of the user. As you can see, uh, the file is called customers.txt, and the pattern is having an ID, a customer ID, a vertical line, then the amount that the customer paid us, then another vertical line, and we have the customer name here. So what your code needs to do is to first show what is the content of the file. So in this case, assume that Heineken is not written correctly. It's just Heine, and the user wants to change the name to Heineken. So the application asks for the ID of the customer for which you want to change the name. So in this case, the user provided a 1, and then give the new name. The user provides Heineken, and then afterward you change the file, and then you show the content of the file to the user. So in this case, you see that Heineken is placed there as the name of the first company. Here is the answer to this question. First, you need to show the content of the file to the user. You don't care about the pattern, therefore you just simply need to read the content of the file using the read method and print everything. I use with a statement here to do the same thing so that I don't need to write the close file in lines 1 to 3. So in line 4 to 6, I get the input from the users, the ID of the customer whose name we want to change, and the new name from the user. Afterwards, in line 7 to 10, I read everything from the file, and I use readlines to do that. You can see here that as a result of these three lines, you have a variable called cost lines, which if you use bracket 0, for example, on this variable, for this variable, you get the first line in the the first line of the file, which is one vertical line, 10,000 vertical line Heine, and a backslash n. And it's also you can get the second line and third line using the brackets. Then in line 11 to line 17, I try to change that uh, that line that that the user wants us to change. So each time I try to iterate through these all these lines. So when I wrote down in line 13 for C in cost lines for the very first time, C is one vertical line 10,000 vertical line Heine backslash n. So now in line 14, when I use c.strip, backslash n is removed, and afterward I use the split function, giving the argument vertical line, and as a result, we can see that the cost parts will include the string of 1, the string of 10,000, and the string of Heine as three elements. So cost parts is a list that includes these three elements. And then in line 15, I can simply check if the first item of cost part is equal to what the user provided, CID, which I got it in line 5. And then if that's true, I'm going to change the name which is in cost parts bracket 2 to the name provided by the user in line 6. So line 16 does the change in the content in the RAM, and excuse me, and as a result in line 17 I can write this new content in the uh, or if the content is changed or not changed, it doesn't matter. I'm going to uh, write down cost parts uh, in the file, uh, in the same file. You can see here again, I'm going to follow the pattern provided by the file. I start with the CID, with the customer ID, which is cost parts 0. Then I'm going to have a vertical line. Then I need to provide the amount that the customer paid us, which is 10,000 here, and then afterward a vertical line, and again the second part. And we don't forget to put backslash n. So write is not like the print function, which already includes a backslash n. You always keep in mind that you need to use backslash n if the pattern is repeated every line in the file. So afterward, after writing everything, we need to show the user that the file is changed, and changed according to his or her expectation. So in line 19 to 20, I simply read everything and show the content of the file to the user. You can do what you can do at home is to use a dictionary to do this creation rather than using and saving everything in cost lines. uh, you can use dictionary to do that. So I leave it to you to do this. Uh, this exercise is a bit more difficult than the previous exercise that you have seen, the previous questions that you have seen here. And the reason is that the pattern is different. Up to this point, the pattern were repeated in each line. Now you see that the pattern is repeated every two line. So you need to be able to figure out how you can write codes like this. So pause here for 5 minutes and or perhaps 10 minutes and try to do this exercise. You need to read the fractions and operations in this fractions dash 5.txt and calculate the result and print the result at the end. So again, as we have seen in the previous exercise, I believe exercise one, the pattern, the first line is not part of the pattern. The pattern starts with an operator and then a fraction. So for this solution, I will use a read line. Of course, you can use read lines, and that's a better option. But I just wanted you to see, another example for read line as well. So you can see here, I opened the file in line 2, and then in line 3, I read the first line, which is 3 uh, blank space 4. Then I use a strip on that to remove any backslash ends at the end or anything. And then I use a split uh, so that I have a list of a string 3 and a string 4 here. And then I'll turn these string 3 and string 4 to integers and place them in A1 and A2 respectively in lines 4 and 5. Note that the last result of all operations will be stored in A1 and A2 in the next lines. Then with while uh, statement, I try to check if we are not at the end of the file. We already learned that we need to do that for all read line functions. So in line 6, you see that while len L greater than 0, so if we are at the end of the file and we use read line, an empty string is returned and we can stop reading the file using this condition. So in line 8, we know that this time we are going to get an operator. So I use OPR as the variable to store what this operator is. I execute readline again and strip it, and as a result I'm going to have the operator, and in this case it's going to be plus. So uh, after reading the operator in line 9, I make sure that this operator is not empty. If we are at the end of the file and there's nothing, so with readline, you always have to check if the result is not an empty string. If it's an empty string, it's the end of the file, and you need to stop all the operations. So I do this checking again in lines 9 and 10, and then I know that I'm going to see a fraction there in the next line. So I do the read line again here. I'm almost sure that this read line will not provide any empty string. I would always see a fraction right after an operation. So what I'm going to do here is that in line 12, I do the read line, a strip, and then a split so that I have the strings of 1 and 8. And after that, I will place them in B1 and in B2. I will place the integer format of these two in B1 and in B2. So now I have A1 and A2. I have B1 and B2, so I can do the calculation. If OPR is equal to plus, then I will do the calculation for the addition of the two fractions. So you see them in lines 16 to 18. If it's minus, I do the calculation for the subtraction. If it's multiplication, I will do the calculation in lines 23 to 25 for that. If it's division, I'll do the calculation in lines 26 to 28. If it's something other than this, I wrote down pass in line 30. That doesn't mean that this is a correct way of writing. It just means that it's a correct code. It just means that here you need to show a kind of error message. You need to raise error or print something to the user and end everything. I'll leave that to you to write it. So doing the operation The result of the operation is stored in C1 and C2. Now I use the simplify function that I created in the file MDL fraction in the previous video to simplify these two fractions, C1 and C2, and then I will place the outcome as I mentioned uh, while explaining line 4 and 5. I place the outcome always in A1 and A2 to be prepared for the next operation. So if we go back to line 6, here you see that we have another operator minus. We're going to read that operator in line 8. So 8 this time in the second iteration, OPR is equal to minus, and then the rest of the code is executed like what I just explained. And after doing everything, uh, in line 36, we just print A1 and A2 to show the outcome. So what I need you to do is to download this file from Canvas and execute these line by line. Note that we also need some high-level file operation. For example, we want to remove a file from the hard disk, or we want to remove a folder uh, from the hard disk. For these kind of high-level operations, you need to import the module OS. And for example, if you want to check if a file exists, you can use of.path.exist and provide the full name of the file and check whether the file exists or not. You can just remove the file by of.remove. You can create an empty folder, an empty directory using os.makedir, dirs. You can remove an empty directory using osrmdir. And however, if you want to remove a folder and all its files, so it's not an empty folder, then you need to use another module called shutil and use rm3 for that. But what you can do is you can use again the os method to retrieve all the file names in one uh, folder, and then remove all the files, and then afterward remove the folder. So even with the OS module you can do the same thing, but of course it would be way easier to do it using shutil module. Note that sometimes it's very important to figure out what the working directory is. Um, so for example, in the first line, you try to figure out if the file exists or not, the file fractions dash 4 dot dash backup.txt. Note that when you don't provide a path, the current working directory is going to be used for any operations, and that is usually where your Python file is. Or in Visual Studio Code, when you open a folder using file open folder menu, then that is going to be your working directory. You can figure out this working directory using os.getcwd, and if you want to, you can change this working directory to something else using chdir. In summary, we learned about various commands related to file operations. For example, the open method was the open function was the most important function, which would create a file handler for us. We could have given various mode as the second argument to this open function, R, W, and A as for read, write, and append. We learned the differences between the three. We learned that we can read the file using three methods, read, readlines, and readline. You learned about the differences between the three methods. we learned that we can write inside the file using a write function, and we also learned that we always need to close the file. And if you see that there is a chance that you forget to do that, you can use the with command to the with statement to do that. We also learned about the OS module. So in general, we learned about the differences between the various open modes, various read methods, and the difference between write and append. We also learned about the danger in neglecting the pattern of the file while reading the file or even uh, writing the file. You also learned about the importance of character encoding in a file. So, for those who are interested in learning more about reading and writing in files, I have placed here some new commands for you. For example, you can read and write, an object from a file. An example is a list. So rather than you write down, the functions, you can easily import pickle and open it in a binary writing mode, and then, use the dump method to, uh, to dump this list into a file, and then you can easily read that list using the load function. So it has made your job way easier. Uh, you can also learn about editing large files, because large files cannot be stored in the RAM. You don't have enough space for them. Then you need to use the seek function to put the cursor at the place that you want uh, the cursor to be, and then you can write whatever you want there. And some other methods, if you want to read and write in a file like a dictionary, then you can use the shelve module. Uh, I also talk a little bit about shutil or shutil. So you can use shutil for copying files, in different ways. So at the end, if you have any question about the lecture, please ask them on Canvas using the discussion form, or you can ask them, in the interactive lecture. In the next class, I will teach you object-oriented programming.